So get this. Here's some news. Can you believe it? According to one survey, over half of the calls that people received in 2020 were unwanted spam. If you recall, this aligns perfectly with previous estimates that automated calls are very swiftly invading our daily lives like the laziest version of a robot apocalypse. The Matrix, relaxations. In 2021, Americans received over 80 billion, with a big ol' B, robocalls and lost nearly 30 billion, with another honkin' B, to telephone fraud. A 10 billion, that's another B, increase from the year before, another B. Last time, I will draw attention to which words I say that start with B. But it sure as heck seems that this situation, something we once identified as being super broken, has continued to deteriorate like an old backyard shed America won't do anything about. It's infested with termites and Clostridium tetani, but gosh darn it, you got your first hand job in there and can't destroy the memories. Best to just not look at it. Or in this case of this analogy, simply refuse to answer any phone call from a number you don't recognize or your good friend scam likely, which according to a TNS survey is exactly what 77% of consumers actually do. We've allowed the robocalls to win, accepting that these small rectangular devices we all purchased and own to make our lives easier will occasionally bother us at random times in an attempt to steal our money. And the only course of action is to apparently just ignore this like the weird guy on a bus. Like, in one, albeit unlikely example, a Colorado hiker made the news for getting lost for 24 hours and never answering calls from rescue teams because he assumed they were a robocall. And reading the story, you can't really blame him. He found his own way back, didn't think he was in danger, and likely didn't realize that people were searching for him. And so the most logical conclusion he reached about getting spammed by the same number is that it was a scam call, which statistically it would have been. This is even more likely in states like Texas and California, the best states, or I don't know, the worst states, one or the other, where people are targeted the most for robocalls. Back in the height of the coronavirus pandemic, you remember that? Remember how that happened and is still happening or is over, but also the president has it? No, not that current president. The current president, not the last one. The one now has it. Anyway, back in the pandemic, one particularly insidious type of robocall was offering COVID at-home testing long before commercial tests were a thing. The pandemic was very lucrative for robocallers who didn't give a if they were selling misinformation to vulnerable people. This is, of course, very common. Some kind of national crisis happens, and all of the scam calls will be related to exactly that. And yes, I am counting Democrats seeking donations after the Roe v. Wade decision as scam calls. Of course, this isn't exclusive to one party, and robocalls in general are not a partisan issue, which really makes you wonder why it's still such a problem. And again, California and Texas have this problem, and they are blood enemies. And to make matters worse, spam texts have officially surpassed robocalls for the first time in history. According to one report, scam text messages were sent an estimated 86 billion times with a butthole of a B, another B, in 2021, which is an increase of freaking 55% from the year before. So man, what is happening here? Who do we go to for help? It's certainly not encouraging that our last two presidents both seem like due to fall for a phone scam every other day. Probably for some kind of dick pill or, I don't know, a fake crude oil giveaway where if you buy 1,000 barrels, they throw in a free shower chair. So what the is happening? I'm sure we talked about it a bit in that last video we did. I'm not going to watch and check, but let's look at the situation as it stands right now. We have robo-dialers in other countries making millions of calls per hour. Since they are international, it's very hard for law enforcement to crack down on them. And even if they did, they can simply move to another location. Those calls get sent to the US through phone carriers who, you could argue, are obligated not to screen calls. After all, some of the big issues is that some robocalls are perfectly legal, even if they still suck, and phone companies don't have the ability to figure out which is which. Additionally, as decided in the Supreme Court ruling for 2016 Spokio Inc. versus Robbins, the basis for suing an illegal telemarketer in court needs to be rooted in a provable injury, and being annoyed doesn't count for that. And so it's nearly impossible to sue a robocaller or a company working with robocallers unless you can prove some kind of real harm. Since that ruling, the risk of telemarketing penalties have significantly dropped, causing a noticeable rise in robocalls. So there's no legal avenue for an individual to fight back against annoying calls, nor has the efforts from the FCC really helped either. One of the most common elements of these scams is something called caller ID spoofing, which is when a robocall falsifies the incoming phone number to appear local to the person getting the call. Because again, these calls are very often coming not from inside the house, but from outside of the country. And so to combat this, the FCC has recently begun to implement a technology called Stir-Shaken. What Stir-Shaken does is require all calls traveling through a phone network to have the caller ID validated by that carrier before reaching the consumer. And that's certainly a fine idea, but even if it's adopted worldwide, we're already seeing scammers get past this by simply purchasing actual local phone numbers and using them. And so instead of simulating the caller ID through spoofing, they're actually, or rather technically, calling you locally. That isn't to say this Stir-Shaken technology doesn't help, and by using real numbers, they can now track scammers more easily, but largely speaking, it hasn't made much of a dent. Along with these flaccid efforts, Congress has at least introduced legislation designed to either increase criminal penalties for scammers or provide liability protection for efforts to trace scam calls. But most of these laws have brought down robocalls only a tad bit. And so when we're dealing with this problem on such a massive scale, this is but a mouse's jizz in a sea of whale spunk, as the Bible says. And so I guess we just have to learn to live with it? Pretend it's not there? You know, like the hand job shed I mentioned before. I really wish I could reveal some obvious answer here, but the fact is that there will always be robocalls as long as we have phones. It's an impossible little problem created from a system that we've deemed the most convenient. And by we, I mean the people in power, because I lied about how we can't do anything about it. After all, we could just make any and all automated calls illegal and hold every company that uses them responsible. And yes, that would mean that politicians can't spam you with legal texts and banks can't spam you with automated messages about credit card debt, but, you know, where's the tragedy there? They will just have to, hire people to call and text you, or maybe just stop bothering people so much. Because again, the root of this problem is that phone companies don't know the difference between legal robocalls and spam ones. Nor do we, the people falling for these scams, know the difference. But we would if they were all illegal. So let's just do that. I mean, I'm sure there are cases where automated calls are extremely helpful, like when you need to know about a doctor's appointment or when your weed delivery is coming. But we can opt into those, right? And by opt in, I mean making the conscious choice to receive them as opposed to hitting a checkbox next to a 10,000 word long user agreement. Or, I guess, second choice, we do what the one hiker did and wander into the forest and start a new life. I'm good with either option. Just let me know. Through text. Don't call me! Hey, thanks for watching that clip. Here's the evergreen end plate to ask you to like and subscribe. It's any day of the year where you are.